Hello, everyone. Welcome aboard today. This is our webinar on Australian, newly launched Australian Data Region. And we won't wait for anyone, I'll get stuck straight in. Um, Briefly here, guys, attendees, you're going to hear some forward-facing statements around some upcoming Smartsheet products and things like that. So obviously that's all strictly confidential, confined to this meeting. Okay, so getting started. Some of you, I know that we have some customers in attendance, so I really appreciate you guys coming along. So InfoSpark will be familiar to some of you, but myself and Lindsay are from InfoSpark. InfoSpark, who's hosting this today. We are a platinum partner of Smartsheet. That means we do everything Smartsheet. So we implement Smartsheet, we resell Smartsheet licenses, and we work all around Asia Pacific. So it's a little bit of background on who we are. And particularly, we've got a lot of experience in helping clients migrate between regions. We've already done it for the European data center, which opened a while ago. We're also interested in helping Australian clients. So Lindsay is our founder and CTO. He's going to be talking you through some of the reasons why you should move and some of the technical background in that. I lead our sales team. I'll talk to you about how it actually happens and some of the implications of that. We're also really lucky to have along today Joe, who's the Director of Solutions and Engineering for Smartsheet's Australia, Asia Pacific, and Japan office. He's going to talk to you about the Australian region, its technicalities, how it comes together, and what features it has and what features are coming. And we've got Jarrod as well, who's going to talk to you about, Smartsheet's commitment to Australia and what we're going to do in this region. So that's our lovely kind of hosts and speakers today. And here's our agenda. So I gave you a bit of a sneak preview of that, but just to kind of match who's going to be talking about what, it's going to be Jarrod first up, then Lindsay, then Joe, and then myself, and then we'll move into some Q&A. Now, in the Q&A, you'll be able to submit your question, and then we'll select those and either answer them via text or a speaker will answer it live. So that's how that's going to come together. So you can make questions anytime during the presentation, but we'll only ask them during the Q&A. So yeah, as soon as they come to mind, I would really recommend putting them in there so you don't forget, because we're going to cover quite a lot of content today. And then without too much further ado, it's good to get stuck straight into it. So I'm going to hand over to Jarrod, who's going to tell us all about why Smartsheet kind of built this new Australian region.
Cool. Thanks, Antonio. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for making the time to join us today. So I was asked to come along and have a bit of a chat about why. Why has Smartsheet decided that we needed an AU region? What was the investment and what's some of the thinking? And I guess if I take a step back from all of that, fundamentally it's about how do we provide the flexibility of choice? We know that everybody's balancing competing priorities, but the discussion on where your data resides is critical. It's tied to how we drive productivity. It's how we safeguard what we're doing as organizations. And at the end of the day, it's our most precious commodity. The data that we have is your unique IP. And so where it resides, the ability of being able to put hand on heart and talk about your auditability, your traceability is critical for all organizations. So that was some of the thinking that went into why we believed we needed to have a presence in AU. For a long time, though, most organizations have thought about where your data resides as something that IT looks after. It's always been an IT issue. And I guess our point of view is it's beyond IT now. In today's world, where your data is located is critical in how every organization delivers your services, how you manage your risk, how you meet the compliance obligations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But where your data is hosted, it's no longer a back office concern. It really is an executive oversight, and one that most organizations are having a discussion on across all levels. And why now? Well, if you look at what Australia's been doing from a legislation perspective over the last number of years, we've been tightening our privacy and security laws. There's a greater expectation from regulators to be able to provide greater oversight. The risks of data misuse or offshore exposure, we're all well aware of, in terms of what we see from the media. And so more and more organizations are under greater pressure, not only to drive greater productivity across their businesses, but also to be able to put greater assurances around who has access to what. And that's critical. So when we broke down the business case in terms of why we should go and invest, what was the thinking behind building out the region, it really came down to three key areas. So what were the legal requirements that we were looking at from a legislation perspective? So in other words, the Privacy Act, IRAP, the Critical Infrastructure Act, etc. These are all things that that we're seeing Australian businesses have to be able to go and comply with. There was obviously industry obligations. So more and more particular industries are having to put hand on heart and talk a little bit more about their data residency, the ability for them to be able to have it onshore. And that's becoming the baseline of conversations. And then finally, the final lens we looked at was productivity gains. So how does an organisation improve what they're doing day to day? How do you provide greater reliability for your businesses? And how do you have greater resiliency across your business by using Smartsheet? So those three factors is what led to us being able to build out the why. Why should we invest in AU? At the end of the day, though, it's still about flexibility and choice. For some organisations, it'll be about hosting in the US or having your data reside in EU to be able to meet certain obligations there. And it's important to understand that the choice of where you reside really does sit with you as a customer. It's not a Smartsheet decision, it's not an InfoSpark decision, it's a customer decision. We believe there are distinct benefits, and that's what we want to talk to you about this morning as to the why we believe it's important for organisations to consider it. For some of you, you'll recall earlier this year, there was a big media insight going on around one of the major universities that had to reveal that where their student data was located was sitting offshore. And that really triggered a lot of conversations around, do end users have the consent to be able to host their data? And that was one of the drivers that we picked up on as well, was to go, okay, how do we make sure that we are providing that flexibility and choice? Because at the end of the day, it's about trust. And I guess that's the key message that we want to be able to reinforce today, that it's about arming you with the right information to be able to make the right decisions. We touched earlier about how regulations are tightening across Australia, and we're not unique in that from an Australian perspective. Most economies around the world, whether it be the EU with their GDPR or the US with their federal and state regulations such as HIPAA, or even in Singapore with their regulations up there with PDPA, they're tightening the requirements of organisations to be able to talk about where their data is located, who has access to what, and be able to articulate the auditability and traceability of your data. That was some of the thinking as to why we believed we needed to do it. So we took all of that into consideration. We also then looked at what we're seeing across the market. So procurement teams we're seeing across most industries are now listing Australian residency as being a baseline requirement. It's no longer a nice to have. It's a checkbox that decides, should you have this, this platform within your enterprise software? And so that our ability of being able to offer that just takes one more roadblock off the decisions in terms of why Smartsheet and how do we simplify your experience of being able to work with us in being able to drive greater efficiencies across your business. So before I hand over to Lindsay, and Lindsay will talk a little bit more about why and what some of the thinking that goes into your business in terms of why you should move, considerations behind that. It's really about understanding more about your options that are available to you today. It's about focusing on what outcomes you need to achieve and knowing deep down that your data is secure, that it's compliant and not having to worry about where your data resides. So you can focus on what's most critical to your business, the ability for you to drive greater outcomes. On that note, what I'm going to do is throw across to Lindsay, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about the why, and also talk a little bit about at what point is that the right decision for you as well. Over to you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Jarrod. And thanks everyone for coming. Okay, so yeah, as Jarrod's kind of covered off, there's some high-level drivers for local data residency. I wanted to go down to that next layer to help you decide whether moving to an Australian region would make sense for your business. And it's been really interesting. Since the new region has launched, we've had lots of conversations with our customers. And we've asked a lot of our customers, is this something that you think is important to you? And what we realized was it's a much more nuanced decision than oh yes, we're a health provider. Yes, we need to be in Australia. And the first thing that really started to come out in those conversations that we were having was it might not be about you and as an organization and what you need. It could be about your customers and business partners. That was really key, that your ability to work with certain industries or form partnerships with certain industries would be prevented if you don't have the data residency act in order. And so like an example of that is an organization we were talking to. They've been using Smartsheet for years, and they're hosted in the US. And their answer to that question was, no, it doesn't apply to us. We're just an engineering firm. And we asked the question, are you doing any work in defense? And they said, oh, actually, no, but we've started putting responses in for tenders to work in defense. And then they realized, oh, okay, actually, this does apply to us because of where we want to take our business. So that's probably the key thing that I'd like you to be thinking about. Then when we go into the laws, and Jarrod touched on these, it's a complex area. We're not going to delve deeply into that. But the way I'd summarize it is, if there's sensitive personal information, including health records, that you do or could be hosting within Smartsheet, then you need to look further. And the same thing goes for if you happen to be holding sensitive government data, and that could be if you're delivering projects into government. And so you're going to have project plans for those government projects in Smartsheet. Financial and defense industry data. And then probably the broadest area that catches the most number of customers would be critical infrastructure, because going back a little bit of time, the Critical Infrastructure Acts, so SOCI, looked at 4 industries, and it was quite narrow in what critical infrastructure was defined as, and that has been broadened immensely to include the food supply chain, higher education, transport. So now, I guess Australia's governance approach to these risks is maturing considerably, and that affects more organisations within Australia. And then on top of that, there's company policies. So beyond the laws, companies will just have preferences for non-compliance reasons why they would like to mandate Australian data residency within the organisation, both for themselves and potentially for their suppliers. So let's look at some of those other reasons. If you can go to the next slide, thanks. So quicker network access. By moving to the Australian data region, you're bringing your data 10,000 kilometres closer with a lot less network infrastructure between yourself and the US hosting. And so that translates to higher uptime, faster network access. I think we all know that US-based apps 99% of the time work perfectly fine. And it's that rare occasion when, say, our internet provider is having trouble getting to the US, that's where this sort of thing pays dividends. The other area is legal simplicity. So the organization's company policies might be saying, look, if we have a legal problem, having our data in the Australian legal jurisdiction just avoids complexity. And the other part of this, which is more of a strategy and planning element, is you might have a modest investment in Smartsheet today, but there's plans to have a lot more users involved, a lot more solutions built within Smartsheet. And then, of course, it's going to make sense to do the migration when you have a small footprint. It makes the migration simpler to do. So moving to the next slide. So if you feel like that AU region might actually be something that your organization needs, then the next step is to plan, okay, so what approach would we take to migration? So let's go through these options. So if you're not a customer today, it's very easy. When you have your contract set up to begin using the Smartsheet platform, you can choose which of the 3 regions you'd like. You can say Australia and you're good. So starting afresh is easy that way. For existing customers, you've got the option of a partial migration. So just cherry picking the parts that have a compliance obligation and bringing that over, or a full migration. We're just going to move everything over. So in terms of upfront cost, as you can imagine, starting afresh is no big deal in terms of cost and effort. For a partial migration and a full migration, it actually depends on how much content you've got and the approach that you would like to take to migration. So that's it's a fairly straightforward process to understand what those costs and timeframes would be, but it really depends on your individual situation. In terms of ongoing costs, obviously, if you're starting afresh, there's nothing to think of. And the same thing goes for a full migration. If you choose to actually run out of 2 regions, you need to keep in mind you'll be maintaining 2 contracts with Smartsheet. And that means if a user is maybe doing the in-country, the Australian data residency related work and some other work in the US or EU, they'll have 2 logins, and so they need 2 subscriptions. Now, Smartsheet's been very helpful. They come to the party when, for short to medium term periods of time, if it's part of a transition, to say, Smartsheet will look after you in terms of the costs of having to have those 2 subscriptions, but that's not considered to be a long-term thing. So if your long-term plan is partial migration, there'll be a cost implication there. In terms of risks, if you're an existing customer that wants to start afresh, and we have seen this happen a small number of times, so you'll be thinking, look, there's nothing we really need right now. The business has changed. We can start from scratch in Australia. The only risk you really need to be concerned about is whether that is properly understood, because you wouldn't want to start again in Australia and then realize, okay, I've got actually more than I realized that I still need in the US, and now I'm in that kind of partial migration situation unintentionally. For the partial migration, there is a lot of risks there. So the Smartsheet regions are distinctly separate platforms, and they're designed to be like that. And so what that means is you can't share content between, say, Australia and the US. You can't, if your colleague was in the US, but you're in the Australian region, you won't be talking in the same ways you normally would have. And you would, if you had an account in both regions, you'd have to be logging into each one separately. And then the risk there is you could be logged into the US and then you upload some health data, and then there's been a compliance breach. There's also, in Smartsheet, you have complex solutions with reports that look at multiple sheets or dashboards that are looking at multiple projects. And if that work has been spread between regions, that capability stops working. So some risks there. And with a full migration, it's the same as what it is today. So there's really no risks there. So in summary, the start afresh is really suitable for new customers. The partial migration would be a good fit for if there is a very distinct team within your organization that has their own solution. They don't use anything else in Smartsheet and there's no plans to. And then a partial migration fits for them. And then for everyone else, a full migration is the way to go. So that's everything that I had to cover. So I'd like to hand over to Joe, and he's going to talk about what the Australian region offers and what the plans are for that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lindsay. All right, next slide, please. So before I sort of go into what's actually already deployed and whatnot, I thought I'd just go through what our approach to setting up the AU region is. As you can imagine, it is a considerable amount of work to go and bring across all those applications and features to another region. So the approach that Smartsheet's taken is to do a staged approach over a period of time. And And we've done it for a number of reasons. One, it is a fair body of work. But the other one is that for those of you who've been Smartsheet customers for some time, you know that we've been going through and modernizing our platform. So we're really rethinking about how people want to manage their work and trying to introduce a more modern UI as part of that. But that also means recoding the platform itself so that it can continue to scale and grow over time that people expect these days for it to be able to support. So there's been a lot of those considerations in terms of setting up our AU region. So what we ended up deciding was let's deploy the core capabilities straight out the gate when we launched in July. And so as you'll see in a moment, you can see that we've gone and put a lot of those capabilities in there straight away. And that was deliberate to make sure that we had enough there so that you can feel confident in being able to go and start using it from day one. So a lot of the core capabilities, as you can see on the left, but also on the right, we very much wanted to make sure we had things like dynamic view and control center and data shuttle, applications that a lot of our customers rely on, being able to use those as you integrate with other applications, as you try and automate and scale your usage of the platform. But I've highlighted a couple there in green, which you can see in the very first bullet point board. Grid, Gantt, and Calendar are our previous legacy views, and we've been updating those views as we go. And rather than deploy card view, we decided to actually go and deploy board view straight away because that was actually available on the US application. So where appropriate, we've gone with the new modern feature instead, and in this case, board view, and the other one was collections. So collections is going to replace over time work apps as a much more intuitive and scalable way to do a lot of the things that work apps was previously doing. So in that case, card view and work apps have not deployed to the AU region. We're going with the new version instead. So we've made some decisions along the way like that to take advantage of some of those newer capabilities rather than deploying the legacy. So a lot out the gate in the first instance, which is great. And, we kind of feel confident that 80% of what people do today is covered off straight out the gate. That was in July. Since then, if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we've added a few more capabilities in there. So data links is a new feature that allows us to be able to link information across sheets. This is something that's going to develop a lot further and will eventually take over from data mesh. So if some of you are using data mesh today, data links is really going to do that plus a lot more. And so that's come on the instance since then. Program reports as it relates to Control Center is now live. And Table View, one of our newest views, is now also live on the AU instance. And so a lot of you probably using Table View today on the US instance. That's now live on the AU region, which is great. Next slide. But we've still got a lot more coming out before the end of the year. So there's the developers are really busy trying to get a lot of these new capabilities out, including the template gallery, especially for new users who are trying to discover Smartsheet for the first time. We want to have that template gallery there for them to be able to do that. Our AI capabilities are coming out as well. Analyze data will be one of the first ones out the gate there. And our new timeline view as well is something to look forward to soon. So those listed there are sort of imminent in the next sort of couple months. But later in the year through to January, we'll also see things like resource management, pivot, calendar, and some of the other add-ons starting to come on. So I've just picked a selection there. We actually have a whole list more that we're going to be releasing between now and the end of the year. But they're the sort of big ones that I just wanted to highlight. There are some other things that we'll be reviewing shortly to make some decisions around when they will come out. So really, look at it as a sort of year-long project to get some of the other applications, maybe some of the lesser used ones, but still ones that people want to see. We'll be making decisions around those soon as to when they'll be coming out, and that'll be in the new year, in the first half of the new year. We'll see a lot of those come out. On top of all of that, though, this is just to get to parity, right? So this excludes all the new capabilities that Smartsheet's working on currently. Not sure how many people caught the webinar recently on our AI launch. We've got a lot coming out over the next few months around that. So those things will be all appearing out on the different regions at the same time. So we've got all of the new capabilities to look forward to on top of things that we want to just get to parity on. All right, next slide, please. So to help you just in terms of getting more information, there is a ton of information on our webpage. So if you just go and Google Smartsheet regions, it'll take you to this page. I've added the link down the bottom there as well. But that'll give you a lot more information about what's on there and what's not. And if we go to the next slide, there is one particular link which lets you actually look at the capabilities that are available on the AU instance versus the US and even the EU, because we do have a number of customers here in our region who've actually deployed on the EU instance over the last couple of years. This is very detailed. It lists all the capabilities that we've got on our platform and lets you see quite clearly what's currently available on the AU instance, and so that you can start to plan ahead. Like Lindsay was saying, that whole migration process that you're going to go through, you can kind of get a good feel for, well, what's there available now and what's expected soon, so you can start to proactively plan that migration forward if that's appropriate for you. So with that, hopefully that's given you a bit more information about what's there now, what's coming soon, and some resources to go look to. But now I want to hand over to Antonio, who's really going to show you the nuts and bolts of how to migrate over.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, and thanks everyone for you listening so far. We're going really well and kind of on time, but I'm going to talk at you a lot now. So we've talked a lot about Australia today, but I think it's really important to flag that Smartsheet actually has 3 distinct regions, and some of you might not be based in the US today. You might be based in the EU. I know of a lot of clients we've worked with actually chose to be on the EU while they waited for the Australian data center to open and things like that. So when we talk about everything I talk about today is applicable across those 3 regions. And I know there's been a couple of questions already about people who maybe have a few different accounts in different regions already. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. So how do you get from one to the other is a really key question. Now, I've got this kind of important quote from Smartsheet's website, and I've got the link there if anyone's curious about it. Those regions can't actually talk to each other, and that's very important. And kind of, if they were able to communicate with each other, defeat some of the purpose of this data residency and privacy and things like that. So there's no connectivity between the regions. Therefore, there's no Smartsheet provided migration pathway. And I think that's a really important point. So, but you're still curious, well, how do we actually get there? And I'll kind of talk you through your options now. So you can manually move data, even though Smartsheet doesn't provide an official toolkit or anything. They do have some instructions online, and there's kind of 2 distinct options in that regard. There is one option is you can export a sheet. So when you're actually logged into Smartsheet, most of you today will see that you're logged into app.smartsheet.com. If you move to Australia or Europe, you would have a new account, and that when you went to Smartsheet, it would actually be app.smartsheet.au or EU. So that's how you can kind of tell what region you're in today. Now, it's totally possible, and I'm sure you guys, some of the attendees today have done this before, of export data out of Smartsheet into a CSV file. You could export from one region as a CSV file, open up a new Chrome tab and import that into a new sheet in your new region. Now, obviously, that's a very manual process. Some important notes about that is you'd lose, if you've ever done that before, you'd lose some formatting and a lot of the structure there, but that is one way to do it. And that, of course, doesn't take into account everything else you've got in Smartsheet, like your workflows, your automations, your reports, your dashboards, all of that. The other option is similar. You can open them in kind of tabs side by side and copy paste some content across. But again, that won't carry over your formulas, your formatting, your column types, and things like that. But we want to be really transparent of as that is the official kind of line from Smartsheet if you need to move some stuff over. And that's why Lindsay really highlighted earlier that if you're kind of new to Smartsheet, that's not as big a deal. You might not have much content, but if you've got a lot of content, that could be hugely time consuming. So what we've developed at InfoSpark is a tool called MirrorSpark. And I'll talk about it today, and of course, happy to answer any questions you guys have in the future about that. MirrorSpark is a tool we've developed. We're really proud of it. We developed it totally in-house in our office in Adelaide. And it's effectively a toolkit that acts as a virtual admin. It will scan your Smartsheet environment and recreate everything in your Smartsheet environment, your existing one, into a new region. Now, I think that's an important kind of phrase there. It recreates the assets because there's no way to physically move them. So it recreates the structure of everything as well as the content and recreates it on the new region you're moving to. Now that encompasses everything. Some of those tricky things like automations, conditional formatting, cell links, things like that. So those are, really your distinct options as a customer of Smartsheet. You can do some things manually, and if you use Data Shuttle, you could probably make some of that a little more streamlined, or you could engage us here at InfoSpark to use MirrorSpark, which is a totally automated process. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that now. So it is fully automated. It's almost as simple as pushing the button and we move the content across, which I think is really good. And that's, I think in talking to customers, I think that's what people expect from the ability to migrate. They want something that is quite simple. In terms of that, it will take days to weeks. So from a timeline perspective, I wish it was as simple as pushing the button. It does take a little bit more time than that. But generally, we've seen migrations being able to be completed in days to weeks. It's not a multi-month process by any means. So for our clients who have a lot of content, it might take a week or two. So that's how that kind of comes together from a timeline perspective. Of course, something that's really relevant is even if you don't have much content and you're happy to move it across manually, or you've got some spare resources in your team, that might not be a super time consuming or costly effort for you, but it still does introduce a risk of errors. And even copy pasting, we've all done it before, copy pasted the wrong email address or sent something to the wrong person. And I think those are really prevalent. So by the benefit of having something automated is that there is no room for kind of human error in that process. I think the next item on this list is the cost. I can't understate the potential internal costs of doing these manually. Even if you have some resources free and things like that, it's really worth kind of doing the math internally of what are those resources costing you in terms of FTE or annual spend or things like that, because it might look like it cost you nothing, but there's definitely a cost involved with that. When we do a MirrorSpark migration, we give you a fixed price up front, and that's based on kind of how much content you have. So you very transparent. And I think an important note on that as well, a lot of you today will be thinking about, the right time for you to move and things like that. So you can get the pricing up front, then kind of layer it into your next budget cycle and things like that. I think another thing is we've done some analysis internally of kind of a cost comparison. If you were having someone recreate a dashboard on the new region and how much is a typical hourly rate for someone who has some Smartsheet experience and things like that, MirrorSpark is generally a third of the cost, to give you guys a bit of a baseline, but we'll talk about that more later. Of course, being automated, it's suitable for really large environments. And I think the other thing that's really important is the support aspect. We've learned firsthand, we've done a lot of these for clients both moving to Australia and clients moving into the EU and other directions, is it's really helpful to have a bit of support from people who know Smartsheet really well. Because there's a lot of things, even if it's automated, that you don't think of. A little example, I had a customer conversation yesterday is, like if you use Smartsheet forms a lot, their URL is going to change because it's a different Smartsheet kind of app and different Smartsheet web address. So little things like that are good things to think about. And, our team of experts can kind of help you through that. So those are the key differences of how do I actually get there and what are my options? And really, these are those options. And as I said earlier, MirrorSpark is our tool that we've developed. And even though we're based here in Australia, we've had clients all around the world use that. And it is, as far as all of our research has suggested, the most capable option globally. And lucky for you guys, you get to talk to us and we're very local. So this kind of reiterates what I was talking about, but I think I want to go a little bit deeper on how long it takes. I know that's a question that's popping up a lot. And a lot of people are concerned about downtime and things like that. So we can actually do migration over a weekend or out of hours or something like that. So we can ensure you don't have any downtime. We also have the capability to keep data synchronized between regions. This is something that's come up a lot. We've talked to some clients that have got a really big project that people are kind of working in every day. They might even have people working on it late at night and things like that. So we can keep that data synchronized so that you don't have any continuity issues once you kind of set your go live date. On the automation front and kind of coming back to quality, we not only have the automation engine driving the change, but we also have humans involved in the process to double check quality and things like that. So I think that's kind of an important call out. And as you can see here, we are kind of an approved region migration partner, and we've helped clients all over the world do it. And again, we are an Australian organization, so we're familiar with some of the local Australian laws and things like that. So we can kind of help you navigate that process, but we've also worked closely with clients in Europe and things like that. So we're really happy to help you end to end in that process because there's a lot to consider, as Lindsay mentioned earlier. Beyond your actual content, there's other things in terms of change management, working with your IT team to get your single sign-on reset up, getting your users to actually log into the right place. There's a lot of other things to consider, and we can kind of help you navigate that process. So those are your manual options. That's a little bit more about us at InfoSpark and our MirrorSpark tool. And I'll go into detail of whether you're doing a MirrorSpark migration or trying to do things yourself. These are the key steps to get your content over. So first of all, you should review everything you've got. And that's something we can do in a more automated way with you as part of MirrorSpark. But for MirrorSpark itself, to actually get a quote on that, we consider your total asset volume, the premium apps you're using, how they're using, and also to go back to what Joe was saying, are the premium apps you're using, are they going to be available in Australia? And that's also something you should kind of consider and review. And then at InfoSpark, we would work really closely with you to define a suitable plan. So we talk about your kind of desired timeline. What are your uptime considerations? When should things actually occur? And importantly, what content actually needs to be moved over? This is something we're seeing a lot of. It's a bit like when you move house, you finally throw out some of those old boxes and things like that. We're seeing that with a lot of Smartsheet customers of there's some workspaces sitting around or there's some old sheets. There's no point moving them or paying to move them or doing it manually. So we see, migration as a really good opportunity to consolidate your Smartsheet environment, make some improvements, and do a bit of a general tidy up. And I talk to a lot of customers who are quite excited about kind of having a bit more of a fresh start in that regard. It's also a good way to get people on board. Often Smartsheet, especially in a larger organization, a lot of different teams use it for different things. This is a good way to kind of get everyone together and understand your key use cases, how it's driving value for the business, and what's important to be moved over and things like that. And then, of course, if you're using MirrorSpark, we push the go button and all of your content moves over in full. And as I said, that includes the tricky stuff like your automations, conditional formatting, column formulas, sheet summary reports, all those little things you might not have thought of. And of course, your dashboards brought over in full. For me, that's kind of a good segue to the validation. As I mentioned earlier, we not only have the automation running it. We also have people in our team who validate and double check quality. And of course, if you're going through a migration, you should have some people in your team double check a couple of things as well. But we also have some AI used to make sure that dashboards are pixel perfect and this widget is exactly where it needs to be and things like that. So a lot of thought's gone into this. And, you know, to kind of tie into what Joe talked about and what Jarrod talked about and what Lindsay talked about is we understand, and I hope you've all today got a bit of a better appreciation of how potentially important this Australian region is for not just you, but also your customers, and why you might need to do it, not for your own business needs, but for the needs of your clients who you're working with. So what we've worked really closely with the Smartsheet team here at InfoSpark so that there is a really streamlined way to move to Australia and eliminate some potential roadblocks in that space. So that's that's a little bit more about how do you actually get there and what does it mean to do that. So a few of you have already asked, like, well, okay, I want to get there. What do I do next? So if you're interested in getting a quote for a migration or just to ask questions or understand it in a little bit more detail, you can reach out to myself and my team. I've got the contact details there. I know a couple of people I gave my email address to who had quite specific questions. You're also more than welcome to, and I recommend talking to your Smartsheet account manager. If you've got an existing relationship with them, they can provide you a little bit more details about your Smartsheet plan, what the potential implications are there, and then they can connect you with us or provide you some more direction from there. So I'll also flag, and we'll come back to it, we have generated a white paper on that kind of covers some of the content today. Before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to flag by the end of this, after this webinar, you'll receive an email from my team that will have a link to a recording of today's session, including the Q&A, as well as a white paper. And then, of course, if you'd like to set a meeting with us and ask them any further questions, we can go from there. Also, people from my team at Smartsheet be able to liaise with people like Jarrod and Joe if you have more specific questions. But without much further ado, we're going to get stuck straight into the Q&A because we've had a lot of really, really good questions. A few of we've already answered, but I'll start kind of working through the list. So I'll go from the very start down. So someone's asked that their company is global and how do they identify who will be part of the Australian region versus others, even if they're all in one tenant. And Lindsay, you said you were going to answer that one.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if this is one you wanted to tackle, Tones, but well, did you want to look at that one?
Okay.
So I just
Thanks for saying you can answer it. Yeah. That's fine. So no, we've encountered this a lot with lots of clients. So it's a more nuanced conversation, but a quick answer is you can have multiple Smartsheet contracts. So we've had some clients who have who a particular team does interact with some of that defense stuff, and they kind of run their own Smartsheet plan in isolation in a specific region. So that's one option. You could also have that kind of spread across multiple tenancies. It is a more nuanced conversation. Sometimes if you have a team that works in a sensitive way in Australia and the rest of the team, it doesn't matter, you might be better off moving everything to Australia and things like that. So it's definitely something we can go into more detail in, and it's something we've kind of encountered before. So again, you can talk to us, you can talk to your Smartsheet account manager on the best way to set that up, both in terms of the outcomes for yourself and meeting all your obligations, as well as from like a Smartsheet contract point of view and what's going to give you the best value for money.
And what I'd add to that is, so we have customers who are global who have said, look, we're just going to run our whole business out of, say, EU region. And then the other option that you would have there in any other organization like that is just looking at, well, how do you structure your organization? It's global. So how do you regionalize your org structure? And we can have a conversation with you about that and then map that into how that would best work with Smartsheet regions.
Okay. Next question. Does this mean existing work apps won't work if we migrate? And Lindsay, you said you're going to answer that one, but I guess you or Joe could answer that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it's a simple answer. Yeah. So anything that's not going to come to Australia or it's not here yet, it won't work if you do a full migration. But what I'd encourage you to do is come and sit with us, and we'll look at how you're using Smartsheet. We might, there's a lot of options available. We've kept the migration options fairly simple today. It's going to work for most people. But if you're in that situation where there's a component to Smartsheet that is not immediately available in Australia, then we can put a plan together. And that covers off Paul's question as well, who was asking the same thing. So if you're absolutely needing to use a feature of Smartsheet that's not available in Australia right now, let's have the conversation about the plan for migration. And it might be that we're not going to be bringing you over immediately.
Next question, and I'm not saying the names because a lot of these are anonymous questions, but is there any way we could combine contracts considering our contract is not finished for several years? I'll answer that one. Yeah, you've got quite a few options there. Even if you're currently locked into a multi-year Smartsheet contract, you can have that contract migrated to the new region. So, and Jarrod can probably comment on this a little bit more detail, but from what we've seen, the Smartsheet team is really flexible in making sure you're not paying for two contracts at the same time and helping switch those around from a paperwork perspective. So you get access to what you need without kind of incurring additional costs and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely an option for you. And the logistics of that can be discussed a little bit further, but not a challenge at all if you're tied into a multi-year contract or something like that. Or if we've worked with some large organizations that there's actual different Smartsheet contracts renewing at different times with different teams who've bought it at different times. It's also a good opportunity to consolidate those, make sure they're all on one region and simplify your billing process. So that's that one answered. Oh, there's a question that doesn't make much sense to me. So Lindsay, you can I see you can answer that one. So that one's from you, Vicky. And Vicky's asked, will this mitigate the problem of the today issue with overseas servers? For example, if you logged into the Smartsheet US server, any automation updates changes a Smartsheet to the US date, so the today date formulas won't work correctly.
That's right. So yes, it will. So the automations in Australia will run as our time zone, which is, I guess, what you're talking about there, Vicky. Having said that, that whole today formula function challenge, which would affect some of the folks on the call, there's workarounds for that, even if you're in the US. So feel free to reach out to us after this, and we can talk to you about how to work around that.
This one probably for Joe and Lindsay. When do you expect the Australian instance to be the same or have parity as the US?
I can take that one. Yeah, I mean, look, just judging on when we launched the EU instance, it did take about 12 months to get everything on there. But the vast majority happened in that sort of 6 to 9 month time frame. So, and we're tracking similar to that. I think the thing that's quite different in the AU instance is that we are, as I mentioned earlier, we are re-architecting the platform, and so we're introducing new capabilities as we go that will go straight onto the AU instance and be like the replacement for some of the legacy products. So that's more following the general roadmap for those new capability releases, and so they'll come out when they come out. But that's the sort of rough timeline I think we're looking at. Certainly what I shared with you earlier with the things that are going to be releasing in the second half of this year through to January, I didn't calculate it exactly, but my gut feel is it's sort of 90% there in terms of what's available today. So I think it'll cover the vast majority of people's deployments, what they're deploying. By the end of January, we'd be able to do the vast majority. So yeah, it's moving at a cracking pace.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Question from Sonia. Will automation workflows and forms be available from the get-go? Yep, those features are already available in Australia, and there's no limitations around them. The only caveat being if you have automation workflows triggering like a Teams or Slack message, that's coming later in the year, but all other automation features are available. That one. Next question was Sam. Sam said, we've only just started with Smartsheet. We don't have much content to move across. How do we transfer accounts sooner rather than later so we can keep building it? Yeah, really easy one, Sam. Get in touch with myself or your Smartsheet account manager. If you don't know who they are, you talk to me and I can kind of triage that. And we get a new Smartsheet contract kind of set up for you, work out any prorated refunds or anything like that you require, and then you can either move your stuff over or just start building in Australia. So if you're not currently on it, there's a really good opportunity, and this is perfect timing for you to kind of move over in that regard. Next question, Jenny. This is more of a MirrorSpark question. InfoSpark then has a copy of our data. What happens to that when the migration is finished? So yeah, we don't retain any of your data for anything. Anytime we store any of your data during that migration process, we can of course make sure that's in Australia. But I'll let Lindsay kind of comment more thoroughly on that.
Sorry, which I was answering another question at the time. We're talking about
That was
a
Jenny's
copy of the
question.
data. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay, Jenny. So yeah, we knew this was going to be a real concern for customers. So what we do is we just getting into the technicalities of it briefly. We'll have a dedicated piece of infrastructure for your migration. We migrate over. We only keep metadata, so IDs basically of your columns and rows, not the data that's within it. And we transfer all the attachments over as well. And then at a time that you agree to, you control it, we then just destroy all of that infrastructure. So at no point after that point that you've agreed will we have anything of yours.
Okay, next question, anonymous. What happens to the sheet links, work apps, user configurations, account settings, configuration and security items, email config settings, DNS entries, permissions, etc.? It's a really good question. I'll hand that one to you, Lindsay.
All right. So there's a mix in there of in your content, configuration in your content, and then system admin configuration. Anything that's in your content, so it's in a sheet, so what email address is going to receive an automation, that kind of thing, that gets brought over as part of an automated migration. And then anything that's system admin, either we would migrate that, we would like manually go and set all that up in Australia, or you have the choice of doing that yourself with or without our assistance.
Next question from Casey. How long will migration options and plans be available to existing users if our company decided to stop using Smartsheets in the US and you and the Australian team want to continue using it? Yeah, it's not like, to answer that one, Casey, and let Jarrod add if he'd like, Smartsheet's not going to turn off your access to either region anytime. Like might be customers who still want to use the US and things like that. So at any time you could kind of get in touch. Likewise, in terms of the migration pathway and things like that, you can engage us at any time. The only thing I will say is if you had a US team or the wider organization was going to stop using Smartsheet, but your team still wanted to use it and you're based in Australia, just have to make sure they retain some licenses so you don't lose access to the content, and then that can be moved over to a new kind of Australian plan or similar. So that's that one. And this is a question for you, Jarrod. I don't know if you've seen that one, but I'll read it out loud anyway. This is from Anonymous. Question for Jarrod. We're a not-for-profit and we're going through the process of subscribing to the new user subscription model in the US. If we move to the Australian data center, would we be able to transfer that pricing plan, or would we have to start from scratch? So I assume that's about kind of the loyalty benefits and things like that.
Yeah, so the short answer is no, we could transfer. So it's really just a conversation with yourself, Antonio, or the sales team, and we would pick up what you already have in place and bring it across.
Great. Another anonymous one. You're looking at migrating to Australia. Should we do this in line with our Smartsheet renewal? That's a really good question. It tends to be a good time to kind of tie it in with your Smartsheet renewal, but honestly, a migration could be done anytime. To give you a bit of an anecdote, we've worked with some clients that, for example, their actual renewal is in February next year, and they're choosing to migrate now, and so that they're not paying for two plans at once. Smartsheet have, and I won't put you too much under the pump here, Jarrod, but Smartsheet have said, well, look, we'll give you your Australian plan for free until February, and then when your renewal's up in February, you don't pay for your US one, but you do pay for your Australian one, and that just gives you a bit more runway to migrate and do some of the change management and things like that. So sometimes your renewal is good timing, but you could migrate pretty much any time. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. I reckon this one will be for you, Joe. What if we like CardView and we want to use CardView in the Australian region? How does Smartsheet support this?
Yeah, wow. I'm kind of curious to know if the person's actually played around with board view because board view is card view on steroids. It's taken it to another level. Look, I think board view's been out for a little while now, and I would encourage the person to go and have a look at board view again because when we release new capabilities, new views, etc. We try to get them out the gate early, which means that they sometimes don't have all the full features available. But board view's been enhanced quite a bit over the last few months in several releases, and it's card view plus a lot more. The short answer is that we can't move card view to card view. Card view is not available in the AU region. Board view is the new card view. And over time, even on the US instance, card view will go away. It will be replaced by board view. So we thought best just to get straight on board with it from the get-go. And that's why we've released board view straight away because it's proved very popular with our customers who've been using it.
Thanks, Joe. And this is a pretty hot question for you, Joe or Jarrod, but I think it's a good question. Someone has said, I would expect Smartsheet to archive off our instance and migrate it as a whole and not have to go through a process like this. And they've said that other web-based services allow you to just pick a location and go from there. What does Smartsheet plan to do to help navigate and potentially fund this transfer?
Yeah, I think, look, fundamentally, we're looking to provide flexibility of choice. So as we touched on earlier, organisations can stay in the US, they can stay in Europe. If the requirements are such that you need to move across to the AU region for legislation reasons, organisational reasons, etc., then what we're asking is start the conversation. Have the conversation with both the team at InfoSpark and ourselves. Let's look at how we scope out. Every migration is going to be slightly different in terms of its level of complexity. And then from that, we can work out what the effort is involved in being able to make that migration. I think we touched on before, for some organisations, it'll be a simple case of just archiving what you have and leaving that sitting in the US. Others, it'll be, we need to full-blown migration.
Thanks. Next question. This is for Joe or Lindsay. Do sheet IDs change after migration?
Yeah, I can answer that. They do.
That was an easy one.
Yeah.
And then Casey has a question which Joe's going to answer is, what countries outside Australia are included in the Oz data region?
Yeah, it's a good question and probably just warrants a bit of clarification. So AU region can actually be used by anyone, anywhere. So you as a customer have a choice on where you want to deploy, regardless of where your company's located or yourself are located. So it's purely a choice. So it's not a geo fixed thing. It's more just as a customer, where would you like to deploy? And AU region is one of those options now.
Thank you. Next question is similar question about frustrated that Smartsheet, that there may be a cost involved and that this isn't as seamless as we'd all like to imagine it. And I think Jarrod's kind of addressed that one earlier. And if you do want more information on that, I strongly recommend you talk to Jarrod and your Smartsheet account manager. I know Smartsheet are doing some things to kind of help make that transition and potential costs as minimized or as seamless as possible. So I consider that one answered. Okay, this is a good one probably for you, Joe. Someone has asked about early access program features. Are they available in Australia? How does that work?
That is an excellent question. So I think the early access features, I'll need to follow up on that one. I think that's a great question. So if you are on the EAP program, you'll still have access to that on the US instance, but will that be replicated in the AU instance? That will have to be a follow-up, Antonio. I'm sorry, I don't have that answer for you.
That's okay. It's a really good question.
Yeah, it is a
I
really good question.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'll also flag, guys, we are at time. We've only got a couple more questions, so we'll keep answering them. But if you have to drop off, I completely understand. And as I said, really appreciate everyone coming along today and answering some really fantastic questions. Again, get in touch with us. We can tell you what the costs are. We can answer any further questions you have. And yeah, you will hear from my team. We'll flick you an email. So you've got a recording of this, access to a white paper, and don't be shy with the questions. We can triage them up to Jarrod and Joe and things like that if you need. And also Lindsay knows really well. So again, yeah, thank you for everyone. We'll keep answering the questions, but if you need to jump, totally understand. I really appreciate all your time today. And for some of our existing customers, thanks for coming along as well. Okay, Craig has asked, he's got a Python code running with the Smartsheet API. Can that be transferred, migrated? I know we work with the API a lot. Lindsay, could you answer that one?
Yes, yep. So the quick answer for that, yeah, it can be. It's a pretty straightforward change in that code will be running the same.
And last one, Greg, I think this is a Joe question. Is there a plan to change the workspace shared to panel?
The workspace shared to panel. I am not sure, actually. That's another one I'll need to follow up on. Apologies.
Yeah, I know that in that workspace panel, there's EAP features that are out to kind of in and around that area. So yeah, not sure exactly what change you were looking for, but I'd say, yeah, you can expect to see some improvements there.
All right, there you go, guys. 1 minute over. That's a wrap. Thank you, everyone. I don't know how to actually end this, but thank you, everyone, for your time today. It's been a pleasure. Don't be shy. Happy to answer more. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.